The quiet town of Sedona, Arizona, was the last place you'd expect to find a crime scene, especially one as shocking as this. Known for its calm and peaceful atmosphere, the town was shaken when the body of a 19-year-old was found under disturbing circumstances. This wasn't just another tragic incident. It involved a young man named Noah Beasley, who had recently married a woman 46 years older than him. What seemed like a bizarre love story quickly turned into something much darker. The relationship between a teenage groom and a 65-year-old bride wasn't just unusual, it became the center of a mystery that left everyone in town questioning what had really happened. As we look deeper into this case, we'll uncover how this strange marriage led to a web of secrets, manipulation, and a tragic ending that no one saw coming. Noah Beasley was just a regular 19-year-old, trying to figure out his place in the world. He grew up in Cottonwood, Arizona, a small town where everyone knew everyone. Noah was quiet and shy, the kind of kid who blended into the background, except when he had his guitar in hand. Music was his passion, and he dreamed of one day becoming a musician. But like many young people, he wasn't sure how to turn that dream into reality. Life at home wasn't easy. Noah lived with his mother, Jenna, in a modest trailer on the edge of town. Money was tight, especially after Jenna lost her job during the economic downturn. Noah felt the weight of their financial struggles and often worried about how to help his mom make ends meet. Despite his own challenges, Noah was known for his kind heart, always willing to lend a hand to others. But something changed in Noah's life that no one saw coming. Just a week before his death, he shocked everyone by marrying Gertrude Hartford, a 65-year-old woman who was wealthy and known for her extravagant lifestyle. This sudden and surprising marriage raised a lot of questions. Why would a quiet, introverted teenager marry someone old enough to be his grandmother? The answers weren't clear, but the consequences would be tragic. Gertrude Hartford was a woman who knew how to make an entrance. At 65 years old, she was far from ordinary. She was wealthy, well-known in Sedona, and had a reputation for getting exactly what she wanted. Her life was one of luxury, filled with designer clothes, extravagant parties, and a long list of ex-husbands. When she decided to marry Noah Beasley, it was clear that this wedding would be no different. The ceremony was held at a luxury resort in Sedona, a grand affair with expensive decorations and a gourmet menu that seemed out of place for a young man like Noah. While Gertrude relished every moment of the attention, Noah appeared nervous and out of place. Those who knew him couldn't understand why he had agreed to this marriage. Was it love? Or was there something else pushing him into this life that seemed so far from his own? The age gap wasn't the only thing that raised eyebrows. Gertrude was known for her demanding and controlling nature. She expected everything to be perfect, and when it wasn't, she didn't hesitate to make her displeasure known. For Noah, who was already struggling with his own uncertainties, this relationship was quickly becoming a nightmare. The dream of a happy life seemed to be slipping further away, replaced by the harsh reality of a marriage that made less and less sense with each passing day. Noah's sudden marriage wasn't just a shock to his friends and family, it was a complete mystery. Growing up in Cottonwood, he was always known as the quiet kid who kept to himself. He didn't have many close friends, but those who knew him described him as gentle and kind-hearted. He wasn't the type to seek attention, and he definitely wasn't the type to get caught up in anything as flashy as Gertrude's world. After graduating high school, Noah was still trying to figure out his next steps. He loved music, but without a clear path forward, he felt stuck. While his classmates moved on to college or started working, Noah remained at home, unsure of where his future would take him. He lived with his mother, Jenna, who had always done her best to provide for him despite their financial difficulties. The pressure of their situation weighed heavily on Noah. He felt responsible for helping his mom, but at the same time, he was struggling with his own uncertainties about what he wanted out of life. So when news broke that Noah had married a woman nearly 50 years older than him, it left everyone baffled. Why would someone like Noah, with his quiet and reserved nature, enter into a relationship that seemed so out of character? Those questions lingered, but the answers remained elusive, buried under layers of complexity that would soon unravel in the most tragic way. Noah's marriage to Gertrude Hartford wasn't just a surprise, it was downright bewildering. To everyone who knew Noah, this union seemed completely out of place. Here was a young man who had always kept a low profile, suddenly thrust into the spotlight by marrying a woman nearly 50 years his senior. Gertrude, on the other hand, was a woman who thrived on attention and luxury, a world far removed from the modest life Noah had known. The wedding itself was an over-the-top affair, with every detail designed to showcase Gertrude's wealth and status. The venue was a luxury resort in Sedona, filled with lavish decorations and a menu that could have easily come from a high-end restaurant. But in the midst of all this opulence, Noah seemed out of place, almost lost. His nervous demeanor stood in stark contrast to Gertrude's confidence and flamboyance. Those who attended the wedding couldn't help but wonder what had led Noah to this point. Had he been pressured into the marriage? Was he doing it out of desperation to help his mother? Or was there something about Gertrude that had drawn him in, despite the glaring differences in their age and lifestyle? Whatever the reason, it was clear that this marriage was anything but ordinary, and it set the stage for a series of events that would soon spiral out of control. Gertrude Hartford was not the type of woman who went unnoticed. She was known throughout Sedona for her larger-than-life personality and her unrelenting need for control. From the moment she entered a room, it was clear who was in charge. Gertrude had been married multiple times, and each of those marriages had ended on her terms. She demanded the best of everything, whether it was her lifestyle, her home, or the people around her. To those who knew her, Gertrude's marriage to Noah seemed like another one of her whims. But unlike her previous relationships, this one raised more than a few eyebrows. Gertrude's controlling nature didn't mesh well with Noah's quiet, reserved demeanor. She had a reputation for being difficult, often throwing tantrums if things didn't go exactly as she wanted. For a young man like Noah, who was already struggling to find his place, living under the thumb of someone as domineering as Gertrude could only add to his stress. As time passed, it became clear that Noah was becoming increasingly overwhelmed. He had confided in his mother about his doubts and fears, but even that didn't seem to help. Gertrude's demands were relentless, and Noah found himself trapped in a situation that seemed to grow more suffocating by the day. The once shy and kind-hearted teenager was now facing the harsh reality of a life he never imagined, all under the watchful eye of a woman who was used to getting exactly what she wanted. On the morning of October 8, 2021, Sedona's peaceful atmosphere was shattered. An 82-year-old neighbor, Marjorie Lane, was out for her usual morning walk when she noticed something strange at the Hartford Bridezilla residence. The curtains were drawn, and the front door was slightly open, unusual for a home that was always kept in perfect order by Gertrude. Concerned, Marjorie decided to check on the house. As she stepped inside, a strong, bitter smell hit her. The house was eerily quiet, and something didn't feel right. When she walked into the living room, she was met with a sight that would haunt her forever. There, lying motionless on the floor, was Noah Bridezilla. Marjorie froze, his body was slumped against the couch, as she tried to process surrounded by several empty pill bottles. She had known Noah, had seen him just glass of water sat on the coffee table beside him. Trembling, she called 911, her voice shaking as she described the scene to the operator. When asked to check for signs of life, Marjorie hesitated, but she did as she was told. She gently shook Noah's shoulder, called his name, but there was no response. His face was pale, his lips slightly blue, and it was clear that he was no longer breathing. The scene was devastating, and as Marjorie waited for the authorities to arrive, she couldn't shake the image of Noah, a young man who had been full of life just a week ago, now lying lifeless on the floor of his own home. The discovery of Noah's body was just the beginning of a tragic story that would soon unfold, revealing secrets and lies that no one in Sedona could have imagined. When the police arrived at the Hartford Bridezilla residence, it was clear that this was no ordinary scene. Detective Marla Grunwald, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for detail, led the investigation. From the moment she stepped inside, she knew something was off. The living something much more deliberate. Detective Grunwald immediately noticed the lack of any signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no signs of a fight. It was as if everything had been carefully arranged, almost too perfectly. The glass of water on the coffee table, the prescription bottles neatly lined up, and the absence of any personal items out of place made the situation even more suspicious. As Officer Tom Jenkins, a young but eager recruit, began photographing the scene, Detective Grunwald took a closer look at the pill bottles. The labels indicated strong medications, including Xanax and OxyContin, drugs often associated with overdoses. But something didn't sit right with her. The amount of medication present far exceeded what anyone would take by accident. This was no simple case of a young man who had taken too many pills. It felt staged, calculated. The detective's suspicions grew as she continued to survey the room. On the mantel, she spotted a wedding photo of Noah and Gertrude. In the picture, Noah's expression was distant, almost sad, while Gertrude beamed with satisfaction. The contrast was stark, and it only added to the growing sense that all was not as it seemed in this household. By the time the forensic team arrived to dust for fingerprints and gather evidence, Detective Grunwald had a gut feeling that this was more than just a tragic accident. The scene was too neat, too controlled. It was becoming clear that someone had gone to great lengths to make this look like an overdose, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind Noah's death. As the investigation moved forward, all eyes quickly turned to Gertrude Hartford. Given her history and the circumstances surrounding Noah's death, it was impossible not to consider her as a prime suspect. When Detective Grunwald and Officer Jenkins arrived to question her, they found Gertrude lounging by the pool, just a few feet from where Noah's body had been discovered. She was sipping a mimosa, flipping through a magazine, and seemed almost indifferent to the tragedy that had just occurred. This casual demeanor didn't sit well with the detectives. While Gertrude answered their questions, her responses were too polished, too rehearsed. She explained that she had gone to bed early the night before, leaving Noah in the living room to play his video games. According to her, she wasn't aware that anything was wrong until the police arrived. She expressed surprise at Noah's death, but lacked the genuine emotion one would expect in such a situation. What made matters worse were the inconsistencies in her story. Gertrude claimed that Noah had been struggling recently and had been prescribed medication to help him cope. But when the detectives pressed her on the details, her answers became vague. She insisted she had no idea he might overdose, suggesting it was a tragic mistake. Yet there was something off about her calmness, as if she was holding back the truth. As Detective Grunwald reviewed the information, she couldn't shake the feeling that Gertrude was hiding something. The house was too clean, and Gertrude's behavior too detached for someone who had just lost her husband. Though there wasn't enough evidence to arrest her at that moment, the detective knew they couldn't let their guard down. Gertrude's calm exterior masked something darker, and the investigation was only just beginning to uncover what that might be. With Gertrude under scrutiny, the investigation took another turn as the police began to look closely at Jenna Beasley, Noah's mother. Jenna had always been a woman who faced more than her share of struggles. Life hadn't been kind to her. She'd dealt with financial problems, bad relationships, and the constant pressure of trying to provide for her son. But there was something more to her story that the detectives found troubling. Jenna had been in a difficult financial situation for years, and it was no secret that she was desperate to escape the debt that weighed heavily on her. To make ends meet, she had even resorted to selling prescription drugs under the table. This risky and illegal activity wasn't something she advertised, but it wasn't entirely hidden either. People in town knew that Jenna was struggling, and some had their suspicions about how she managed to get by. When the police brought Jenna in for questioning, she was visibly nervous. Unlike Gertrude's composed demeanor, Jenna was frazzled, her hands shaking as she lit a cigarette. She admitted that she had encouraged Noah to marry Gertrude, seeing it as an opportunity to improve their dire financial situation. She believed that Gertrude's wealth could provide a way out for both her and Noah, and she had pushed him toward the marriage despite his doubts. But when the conversation shifted to the drugs found at the scene, Jenna became defensive. She denied any involvement, insisting that Noah must have gotten the pills from somewhere else. Yet Detective Grunwald wasn't convinced. Jenna's financial desperation, her involvement in the illegal drug trade, and the pressure she put on Noah to stay in the marriage all pointed to a deeper connection to the events that led to his death. As the questioning continued, Jenna's story began to unravel. Her nervousness turned into erratic behavior, and she started contradicting herself. At one point, she claimed she hadn't seen Noah for days, only to later admit that she had visited him the night before he died. These inconsistencies, combined with her clear motive and troubled past, made Jenna a prime suspect. The detectives knew they were getting closer to the truth, but there were still pieces of the puzzle missing, and Jenna's involvement was becoming harder to ignore. With both Gertrude and Jenna under the microscope, the investigation took yet another turn as attention shifted to Harry Hartford, Gertrude's ex-husband. Harry was a 70-year-old real estate mogul with a reputation for being ruthless in both business and his personal life. His recent divorce from Gertrude had been anything but amicable, and the timing of Noah's death, so soon after their split, raised suspicions. Harry had made his fortune developing retirement communities across Arizona, a business that had only grown more profitable over the years. But despite his financial success, his personal life was in shambles. The divorce from Gertrude had been particularly bitter, with Gertrude walking away with a sizable chunk of Harry's wealth. This left Harry not only humiliated but also deeply resentful. When Noah entered the picture, marrying Gertrude just months after the divorce, it was seen as an insult Harry couldn't easily ignore. The idea that his much younger replacement had taken his place in Gertrude's life fueled his anger. Though Harry tried to maintain a calm exterior, those close to him knew that he was seething with jealousy and resentment. When the police brought Harry in for questioning, he was cooperative, but his answers were carefully measured. He admitted that he was furious about Gertrude's new marriage, calling it a slap in the face. However, he denied any involvement in Noah's death, claiming he had been busy with business matters and had little contact with Gertrude or Noah since the divorce. Harry's alibi seemed solid. He provided details about a business dinner in Phoenix on the night of Noah's death, with several high-profile witnesses to back him up. But despite his cooperation, Detective Grunwald couldn't shake the feeling that Harry was hiding something. His calmness seemed almost too practiced, as if he had rehearsed his responses to appear innocent. Adding to the suspicion, witnesses reported seeing Harry and Gertrude in a heated argument just days before Noah's death. The confrontation, which took place at a local country club, had been public, with Harry reportedly telling Gertrude she would regret their divorce. While there wasn't enough evidence to arrest Harry, his jealousy and lingering anger kept him firmly in the detectives' sights as they continued to dig deeper into this tangled web of relationships and motives. Just as the investigation seemed to be hitting a dead end, a breakthrough came in the form of unexpected new evidence. On October 15, 2021, a sealed envelope arrived at the Sedona Police Department, addressed to Detective Grunwald. Inside was a USB drive, sent anonymously, that would change the course of the investigation. When Detective Grunwald plugged the drive into her computer, what she found was both shocking and revealing. The USB contained a series of text messages between Gertrude Hartford and an unknown contact, exchanged just days before Noah's death. These messages painted a dark picture of Gertrude's true intentions. She had been planning to divorce Noah and cut him out of her life completely. But that wasn't all. She also planned to use her knowledge of Jenna Beasley's illegal activities to keep her at bay. The messages were laced with frustration and anger, revealing Gertrude's growing impatience with Noah. She complained about his lack of enthusiasm as a husband and made cruel remarks about him. One message stood out in particular, where she expressed her desire to rid herself of both Noah and Jenna, using any means necessary. Even more disturbing was the mention of a third party who had been feeding Gertrude information about Jenna's drug dealings. This person, a private investigator Gertrude had hired, had been digging into Jenna's past, collecting dirt that Gertrude could use as leverage. The messages made it clear that Gertrude was willing to go to great lengths to eliminate anyone who stood in her way, including her own husband and his mother. This new evidence put Gertrude back in the spotlight, but it also raised serious questions about Jenna's role in the events leading up to Noah's death. Had Jenna learned of Gertrude's plans and acted out of desperation? Or was she merely another pawn in Gertrude's twisted game? The detectives knew they were onto something big, but they also realized that the truth was far more complex than they had initially thought. With this new information in hand, the investigation took on a new sense of urgency. The detectives intensified their focus on both Gertrude and Jenna, knowing that the answers they sought were within reach. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, but the full picture of what had happened to Noah Beasley was still waiting to be revealed. Armed with the new evidence from the USB drive, the police turned their attention back to Jenna Beasley, this time with a sharper focus. The messages between Gertrude and the unknown contact had raised unsettling questions about Jenna's involvement in her son's death. The detectives needed to know just how deep Jenna's desperation and involvement went. Detective Grunwald started by re-examining the phone records and text messages from Jenna's phone. It quickly became clear that Jenna had been in frequent contact with Noah in the days leading up to his death, more so than usual. The tone of their conversations suggested a growing tension, as if Jenna was pressuring Noah about something. The investigation revealed that Jenna had been increasingly worried about the future, both her own and Noah's. She was terrified that the fragile marriage between Noah and Gertrude might fall apart, shattering any hope of financial security. As the detectives dug deeper, they discovered a troubling pattern. Jenna had been sending Noah a steady stream of texts, urging him to keep Gertrude happy, to do whatever it took to maintain the marriage. But these weren't just words of motherly concern. The messages had an edge to them, a sense of urgency that bordered on desperation. Jenna knew that if the marriage failed, so would her chances of escaping the financial pit she had been in for years. When confronted with this new evidence, Jenna's behavior became even more erratic. She denied having any knowledge of Gertrude's plans to cut them both out, insisting that she had only ever wanted the best for Noah. But the detectives weren't buying it. Jenna's history of illegal drug sales, combined with her apparent desperation to keep the marriage intact, pointed to a much darker role in the events that led to Noah's death. As the pressure mounted, Jenna's story began to crumble. The detectives pieced together that Jenna had been secretly feeding Noah prescription drugs, likely in an attempt to keep him calm and compliant. But things had spiraled out of control, and what might have started as a misguided attempt to help had turned deadly. Noah's overdose was beginning to look less like an accident and more like the tragic result of a mother's desperation. With the evidence mounting against her, Jenna Beasley was no longer just a concerned mother caught in a difficult situation. She was now a key figure in a case that was rapidly unraveling into a twisted tale of manipulation, desperation, and ultimately a tragic loss that could have been avoided. The detectives were getting closer to the truth, but they knew that the final pieces of the puzzle were still out there, waiting to be uncovered. As the investigation wrapped up, the evidence against Jenna Beasley was overwhelming, leading to her arrest. The trial of Jenna Beasley began in early December 2022, and it quickly became the center of attention for both the local community and the media. Reporters from all over flocked to the courtroom, eager to cover the shocking details of a case that had captivated Sedona and beyond. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Mark Christensen, painted a damning picture of Jenna. Christensen, known for his methodical and relentless approach, argued that Jenna's actions were driven by greed and desperation. He laid out the evidence clearly: Jenna's financial struggles, her involvement in illegal drug sales, and the mounting pressure she placed on Noah to maintain his marriage to Gertrude. The prosecution highlighted the text messages, phone records, and Jenna's own contradictions during questioning as proof that she had been manipulating her son, leading to his tragic death. On the other side, Jenna's defense was led by Carlita Vasquez, a public defender with a reputation for compassion and dedication to her clients. Vasquez didn't deny that Jenna had made terrible choices, but she argued that these choices were the result of a mother trying to do what she thought was best for her son. She emphasized Jenna's difficult life, her financial desperation, and the fact that Noah's death was a tragic accident rather than a premeditated act. Vasquez appealed to the jury's emotions, asking them to consider the circumstances that had driven Jenna to such extreme measures. Throughout the trial, Noah's family watched in silence, their grief palpable. The courtroom was tense as the jury listened to both sides, weighing the evidence against the arguments for leniency. The trial revealed not only the details of Jenna's involvement, but also the profound impact this case had on everyone involved. When the jury finally reached a verdict on December 15, 2022, the atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. Jenna Beasley was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The jury believed that while Jenna's actions had led to Noah's death, there wasn't enough evidence to prove that she had intended to kill him. The judge sentenced Jenna to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. The verdict brought mixed reactions. Some felt that the sentence was too lenient, given the tragic loss of a young life, while others believed it was fair, considering Jenna's desperate circumstances. For Noah's family, the verdict offered little comfort. They were left to grapple with the reality that their loved one was gone, taken by the very person who was supposed to protect him. The trial marked the end of a dark chapter, but the pain and questions it raised would linger for a long time. When the jury delivered their verdict, the courtroom was silent, with everyone on edge. Jenna Beasley stood before the judge, her face blank as the words "guilty of involuntary manslaughter" echoed through the room. It was a moment that brought a mix of emotions for those involved: relief that justice had been served, but also a deep sadness for the life lost. The judge, taking into account the complexities of the case, handed down a sentence of 10 years in prison for Jenna, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. It was a decision that left many in the courtroom with conflicted feelings. On one hand, Jenna's actions had led to the death of her own son, a young man who should have had his whole life ahead of him. On the other hand, it was clear that Jenna was a woman who had been pushed to the brink by circumstances, making choices driven by fear and desperation. The sentence offered little in the way of closure. The pain of losing Noah in such a tragic way weighed heavily on them, and the knowledge that Jenna would eventually have a chance at freedom only added to their grief. They were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, trying to make sense of a tragedy that had torn their family apart. In the community of Sedona, reactions were mixed. Some felt the sentence was too lenient, believing that Jenna's actions deserved a harsher punishment. Others saw it as a fair outcome, given the difficult life Jenna had led and the circumstances that had driven her to such desperate measures. But no matter where they stood, everyone agreed on one thing: Noah's death was a senseless loss, and the effects of this case would be felt for years to come. As Jenna was led away to begin her sentence, she appeared numb, as if the reality of what had happened hadn't fully sunk in. The courtroom emptied out, leaving behind the echoes of a case that had revealed the darker side of human desperation and the tragic consequences that can follow. The verdict had been delivered, the sentence handed down, but the impact of Noah's death would linger in the hearts and minds of those who knew him, a reminder of how fragile life can be. In the months following the trial, the small town of Sedona struggled to come to terms with the events that had unfolded. The case had left a deep scar on the community, one that wouldn't heal quickly. Noah Beasley's death was a reminder of the fragility of life and the tragic consequences that can arise from desperation and poor decisions. The Beasley family, already devastated by Noah's loss, found it difficult to move forward. The trial had brought some answers, but it also left them with many unresolved feelings. The knowledge that Jenna, Noah's own mother, had played a role in his death was a burden that weighed heavily on their hearts. They tried to find solace in the support of friends and neighbors, but the pain of losing Noah in such a senseless way was something that would take time to process. For the residents of Sedona, the case became a point of reflection. Many questioned how such a tragedy could happen in their peaceful town. The story of Noah and Jenna was a stark reminder of how financial hardship and emotional turmoil can push people to the edge, leading to decisions that have irreversible consequences. The community, known for its close-knit atmosphere, rallied together to support one another, holding events in Noah's memory and offering help to those affected by the case. Local businesses and schools even started programs to address the underlying issues that had come to light during the investigation, such as mental health support and financial counseling. There was a collective effort to ensure that something like this would never happen again. The tragedy had opened many eyes to the struggles that some of their neighbors were facing, struggles that were often hidden behind closed doors. As time passed, the media coverage of the case faded, and life in Sedona began to return to a semblance of normalcy. But for those who had been touched by Noah's story, the impact was lasting. The town held a memorial service in his honor, where friends, family, and community members gathered to remember the young man who had been taken too soon. It was a solemn occasion, filled with music, speeches, and quiet moments of reflection. Though the legal chapter. As the dust settled on the tragic events that had unfolded in Sedona, the community was left to reflect on the lessons learned from Noah Beasley's untimely death. The story of a quiet young man caught in a web of desperation, manipulation, and ultimately, tragedy, served as a stark reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the consequences of decisions made under pressure. For those who knew Noah, the pain of losing him would never fully fade. but there was also a sense of resolve. The community had come together in the aftermath, supporting one another and working to address the issues that had contributed to the tragedy. There was a renewed awareness of the importance of mental health, financial stability, and the need to look out for one another, especially in a town as close-knit as Sedona. The case also left a lasting impact on the legal and law enforcement communities. Detectives like Marla Grunwald had seen firsthand how a series of seemingly small decisions could spiral into something much larger and more devastating. The investigation had been a complex and challenging one, but it had also highlighted the importance of persistence, attention to detail, and the need to approach every case with an open mind. In the end, the story of Noah Beasley was one of loss, but it was also a story of lessons learned. It reminded everyone that behind every headline is a real person, with real struggles, and that the choices we make can have far-reaching effects. While the tragedy that unfolded in Sedona will be remembered for its darkness, it also brought to light the strength and resilience of a community determined to heal and to prevent such a loss from happening again. As life slowly returned to normal in Sedona, the memory of Noah and the events surrounding his death remained a part of the town's history, a sobering chapter that would not be forgotten, but one that also underscored the importance of compassion, understanding, and the support we offer to those around us.